A really big-time visitor is due in for Ole Miss football this weekend. Yes, the Portal King is Portal Kinging again. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm Stephen Willis, a former staff member at Ole Miss and a 10-year veteran of the national media at Yahoo Sports. Also did a little bit of time at WSMV in Nashville as well. Today on the show, we'll tell you about another cornerback set to visit this weekend and why you shouldn't look at the transfer portal as an event, but more of as a process. We'll talk about that today on the show. As I mentioned, I'm Stephen Willis and the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and YouTube. So thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers that make the show what it is. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Now, Ole Miss notoriously has a late start time compared to other schools for when school starts back. That's the way it's always been. Whenever I was there, you would take the winter session and all of that in between because the spring semester didn't start until the end of January. And that is still the case at Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi. And because of that, lots of hand-wringing right now over Ole Miss having to hold on because they can't lock people into place as a transfer going into it. And then Tyler Barron famously went to Louisville, and Tamari McDonald's at Louisville as well. And everybody's worried about that. And honestly, whenever I was at Ole Miss, they scheduled like special team meetings or something to make it to where Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis got locked in even faster. So that would be over with because they were worried about him transferring, I guess, back to Indiana because that was still going on. And that was back in, 2005, 2006? It's been a minute. So with everything that's going on, I've been telling you, Ole Miss is a late date with all these big name players that are going into the portal. It's an advantage season for the Ole Miss Rebels. Lots of people don't see it that way because they want to view the transfer portal as an event that can be won or lost and not a process that basically can be replenished and recycled all the way through, all the way up until August. But Lane Kiffin went to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and secured an official visit from Trey Amos, cornerback at Alabama that was slated to be a starter next year. He played a good bit this season as well for the Alabama Crimson Tide. And everybody needs to know, Trey Amos, he was a transfer to Alabama. That's important to realize. He was brought in to Alabama to play defensive back in that secondary, and that secondary was Nick Saban's baby. Don't let anybody tell you any different. So if anybody can play in that secondary, and he was trusted by Nick Saban, every fan should be on board with this player. Literally every cornerback that comes out of Alabama, you should be on board with him in your program because of what that position means to Nick Saban, and by proxy, what it's going to mean to every defensive coordinator that comes in. We always talk about the need for a Brian Brown and why Pete Golden is a front seven type defensive coordinator to where he uses those to make explosive plays. A lot of that is because he was trained at Alabama, and the secondary has always been Nick Saban's baby. That's one of the reasons I'm excited about Brian Brown coming into town as well. But Lane Kiffin went to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, secured the official visit. Hey, we had a shark tweet as well from Lane Kiffin, which is not the same thing necessarily as the Pete Golding shark, but it could be. So there's a chance that Trey Amos is going to come to Oxford essentially already committed. It's a trip of confirmation. And Oxford is in the deep freeze at the moment. The roads are basically impassable. On Thursday, the mayor of Oxford was begging people to stay off the roads because of how treacherous it was. and they've delayed the start of school like 2 more days. Instead of like the 23rd or something, they start on the 25th, or maybe instead of the 22nd, it's 24th. Either way, the middle of next week will be the start of the spring semester. I do not know. I have not heard if they push back the drop ad date, but I would imagine they have, which means that there's 2 extra more days for a player to enroll at Ole Miss. But Trey Amos is a really good cornerback. If you look at his stats, he was graded on PFS, and everybody knows how I feel about PFF ratings, but they can be fortunate and they give you a nice basis of comparison. He played really well at Louisiana Lafayette, and ended up transferring to Alabama. In Alabama, he played a good bit behind Terry McDonald and Kool-Aid McKinstry, 2 potential first-day draft picks. And whenever McKinstry got injured against the Georgia Bulldogs, Amos went in and played against Georgia and had his highest grade game of the year. Played really, really well. And if you look at Ole Miss is about to go up against Georgia, you can see where the attraction would lie. Now, Ole Miss lost some players in the transfer portal to Louisville. That's famous. They also lost some cornerbacks. DeCameron Richardson. Trey Amos is better than DeCameron Richardson. Taz Nicholson. Trey Amos is better than Taz Nicholson. And both of those broke away from the Ole Miss transfer portal class after Kenodo Hudson lost his role with the team and Brian Brown was brought in. Whenever you lose a coach, you lose players. It always happens, either at the head coach level where it's a free fall for everybody, or a position coach leaves and they have the opportunity to play for somebody else or go do something else. All of a sudden they leave as well. There is no loyalty to an institution. There is no program anymore. Drop that. It's, I know you might want it. I know that world is comfortable to you. That does not exist anymore. The 2023 team is a completely different animal than a 2024 team, and the startup has to happen the same way. That's why it's going to be important for Lane Kiffin and everybody to come up with the secret sauce of how to affect chemistry. And I think after last year, they may have an idea how to do that. And a lot of that has to do with just a returning quarterback. But Trey Amos would have been the best cornerback that I can remember that has played at Ole Miss probably since Senquez. That's crazy to go back 10 years. But if you think about it, who has been better? I mean, DeAndre Prince was good. He was fine. But we're talking about an elite level type talented quarterback. And I can't remember anybody until Senquez that I would immediately take over Trey Amos. And I think that's interesting. I think that's something really cool. And whenever you look at what can happen defensively with this front seven that Ole Miss has constructed with Princely Amonmiela, Walter Nolan, J.J. Pegues, Jared Ivey, and those linebackers, Pooh Paul, T.J. Dudley, Suntarum Perkins, those guys, and where the front seven of this defense could be, you need some talented people on the back end as well. Now, Trey Amos is a one-and-done guy. He's 1 year and gone, I do believe, and he's going to go off to the league after he supposedly has a really good year. He's had really good coaching, and he's been on it for the last couple of years. It'll be interesting to see his step becoming the guy, because if Trey Amos steps on Ole Miss's campus, he becomes the guy pretty much immediately over everything else, even over Chris Graves, who was a top 100 recruit. Trey Amos is the alpha in that cornerback room if he commits. Chris Graves and Amorian Walker, they're going to compete for those next positions, and you have a nice rotation that is developing. You add Cedric Beavers, and you have a chance to have a decent cornerback room going into 2024. And, 3 days ago, everybody was freaking out. Now you see what's going on. View this as a process, not an event, and you will all be a whole lot saner because of it. Seriously. Thanks again for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day. We're just getting started. We look at a player to watch potentially and talk about the transfer portal as a process and not an event. tune in for that as we go down that road. I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season is wrapping up, or it has wrapped up. They're in the playoffs now, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when they place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose. The app is so easy to use, and there's so many different ways to bet, like live same game parlays. Pick three different things or so within the same game, and you can bet on those for a greater chance of winning money. You can also find bets in the new Explore tabs. If you're not very creative like me, that and the Parlay Hub is just massive, massive stuff because it has a whole bunch of stuff that I wouldn't even consider. It's the best way to find popular parlays, and they have many, many more things as well. So visit FanDuel.com/locked-on and make your first bet a layup. FanDuel, an official partner of the NFL. Locked On has launched its first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover each and every league. Go to Locked On Sports today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Now, there's some other players that's coming up, and there's a lot of people that is getting into the portal right now. The Washington and Arizona kids are going absolutely nuts going in. I think 10 players on Thursday went into the transfer portal for Arizona, including Jonah Coleman, who we did a video back earlier in the week about what he could do in the portal as well. Lots of players that are coming into the portal. And if you go to like Jackson Dart's Instagram and look at who he's following, you can get an idea of some of the targets that might be happening to Ole Miss. They're at least trying. They may not get any traction on it, but they're trying. Now, Ole Miss thought they had stemmed the tide on the Tyler Barron thing, and Tyler Barron was getting ready to move into a new house. And right at the last moment, he decided to transfer to Louisville, and that's fine. And it just kind of is what it is. Like I said, I'm not going to lose sleep over anybody that decommits out of this class. There's 3 players in this transfer portal class that I would freak out about if they decommitted or they went somewhere else. As long as those 3 aren't getting touched, everybody else, in my opinion, is replaceable. But just to let you know, if Princely Amon Mielon, if Walter Nolan, if Pooh Paul, if those 3 players, those are tentpole players in this class, if they went somewhere else, then it's time to worry. Then it's time to break out the flamethrower. Then it's time when all those hot takes can be real. But it just is what it is. As it sits right now, I'm not going to freak out over Tyler Barron, and nobody should freak out over Tyler Barron, because this transfer portal, people want to look at this as an event. This happens and it's over. And the media needs that. They need events. There's a reason that signing day, when it was just one signing day in February, was a huge, massive event. Everybody could sell for it. Everybody could prepare for it. And it was either win or lose at that point, and it was completely over. So their rankings and everything meant so much more and all of that. This transfer portal situation, it's a process, okay? It's not an event. When Tyler Barron committed in mid-December, everybody freaked out and acted like it was over. But with a transfer player, it's never over. It's just not. And it's going to keep going. And whenever you expect, it's like, well, he committed, you should stop recruiting. That's that baseball logic. They do that in baseball. They do not do that in football. They do not do that in basketball. And honestly, they probably shouldn't do it in baseball. But if they're not bound, keep going, keep committing, keep trying to get that player until you find a way to get it done. Louisville found a way to do it by signing his brother, Wesley Walker, the Tennessee player who did not have an offer at Ole Miss, went to Louisville as well. And he was able to get to Mary McDonald, and they all peer pressured him. It happens. But Ole Miss just immediately went there and was like, okay, that happened. So now let's go here. And if you look at a player that you might want to keep an eye on, this is from Zach Berry. Ole Miss lost that commitment to Tyler Barron, but they immediately pivoted to BJ Green. And it's a situation where this Arizona State defensive end who actually would match up better as I'm not going to say run stopping defensive end, but the strong side defensive end. He fits in that position just like Jared Ivey does. And you can see how it would work. This is actually a better fit for Ole Miss football than Tyler Barron was. Under Tyler Barron, I looked at that real similarly to the way Ole Miss treated they had Spencer Sanders, and our opinion of Spencer Sanders throughout the year. That was my opinion of Tyler Barron. It's not that we were enough. I'm never enough person. There's always going to be me wanting more, but there's also me doing common sense about it and realizing that Ole Miss needs to be efficient about what they're doing. BJ Green would fit wonderfully on that strong side of that defensive line. He can get after the quarterback as well. He's a good football player. And in this defense, the front seven would be better with him in it than with Tyler Barron. Now, there's some questions whenever Tyler Barron left Tennessee, and I don't want to get too far down the weeds on that. But after he left for Louisville, there was a whole lot of people that wanted to come in and invite me to the pylon for this player. And apparently Tennessee fans are not happy. Not that he's leaving. I don't think Tennessee fans want him to get the credit for being good. The thing that I heard is he's a good player whenever he does it and he tries to go, but he only does that about 20% of the time. So take that for what it's worth as well. Lots of players are going to pop up in the portal. I put a video up a couple of days ago for Jonah Coleman, who is officially in the portal. Lots of people think he's going to Washington. That's where Jed Fish is. That's going to be the first guess for everybody that gets in there. But the trick is, before he enrolls at the next institution, you need to turn his head. And even if he was planning on going to Washington, if you get his head turned and get him to visit Oxford, you have as good a chance as anybody. Just like Tyler Barron in Louisville, that can happen and work the other way as well. We've hit the part of the transfer portal where Ole Miss is one of the few schools in America that has not started class yet. The drop-add date is going to be at the beginning of February. Jackson Dart famously signed at the very end of January, very early part of February, and we all saw how that worked out. So, don't look at the transfer portal as an event. Although we're going to get excited about a kid committing because it's better to have a kid committed than not have a kid committed. But understand that roster building is year round in this. And even after the drop ad date passes and this transfer window essentially closes for Ole Miss football, another window is opening up April 15th through the 30th, where all those players in the summer are going to be in the portal as well. So if you don't have everything you want, don't freak out. There's still plenty of time to get it done. And that is an important part in this whole deal. Viewing the transfer portal as just a fabric of what's going on as opposed to a pass-fail type event, I think will create a bunch of sanity within the fan base. You have to understand who the not losable players are, because there are generally one or two players that are not losable in a class if you want an elite class. That just works. But there's not many of them. There's probably one or two or three in a class, and then after that, they just didn't exist. And Ole Miss has not lost one of those players. And if you look at what's going on, if you're talking about the transfer portal being a process, let's say Ole Miss gets a commitment from Trey Amos. He is better than DeCameron Richardson. He's better than Taz Nicholson was. You lost both of those. You freaked out about him. You immediately replaced him with someone better who has a chance to be the alpha dog in that room. You have a situation now that you have a defensive backs coach in place, and I'm sure he's working really hard to find somebody that's one of his guys to get in the door to figure out what's going on. That's a position to watch also in the spring transfer portal period. because of all of that stuff. But if Ole Miss doesn't sign a running back in the next 9 days, if Ole Miss doesn't sign that interior offensive lineman in the next 9 days, don't freak out. There's another window left to go. After the drop ad passes, basically you're at the point of a football game with about 10 minutes left to go. You're still not at the point where you can just level as like, okay, this is terrible, this is bad, anything like that. So we'll see exactly how that goes. Still more to come on Locked On Ole Miss, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Ole Miss takes on the Auburn Tigers tomorrow night in Auburn, Alabama. We talk about what happened versus LSU on Wednesday and look ahead a little bit about what that could possibly mean. But I do want to let you know that today's show is brought to you by Game Time. You shouldn't have to worry when you buy tickets to your next big event. It's, easy to find and buy tickets. That's a must situation for everybody in whatever area you might be. Game Time has views from all the seats in the venue of wherever you want to check it out. They're the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. See a view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And they have all-in prices, so you can check your total up front and know that you're getting a great deal when you check out. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 clicks, and you will be good to go. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even after an hour after it starts. The place to find last-minute tickets is Game Time. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Again, terms apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, all one word, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen of the day, and shout out to the everydayers. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. Be part of history. All right, Ole Miss dropped a game against the LSU Tigers on Wednesday night, 89-80. It was just honestly a night. If you want coverage and us talking about it, I had Tim Thomas on the show last night, and we looked at that game, a good bit of it. But the main thing that everybody needs to take from it is Ole Miss didn't shoot particularly well. It was a game when shots didn't fall. And when shots don't fall, it's hard to win basketball games. It's a weird situation how that works. LSU did a decent job of cutting off the three-point lane and kind of forcing Ole Miss to drive it into the paint. They D'd up. Everything happened. LSU won the game. LSU's 3-1 in the SEC. Now, the two of the worst teams in the SEC last year, or three of them, if you include South Carolina, was Ole Miss, LSU, and South Carolina, and all three of them made a jump this year. So Ole Miss is 15-2 right now, and they are headed over to Neville Arena in Auburn, Alabama, Saturday night on the SEC Network, I think, and it's going to be a massive game in the jungle. It's not often that Ole Miss and Auburn has played a basketball game where both teams have a number beside their name, but Auburn's probably playing as well as any team in the Southeastern Conference right now. And it's going to be a difficult task. And if Ole Miss plays like they did in the second half of that LSU game, that's not going to be a good situation for Ole Miss basketball. Ole Miss probably is not going to win the game if they execute at that level. Ole Miss needs to make shots. Ole Miss needs to handle inbound plays. Ole Miss needs to D up. What we saw against the Florida Gators, we need that level of effort as a minimum against the Auburn Tigers. Auburn's going to boat race you. It'll look like the Tennessee game. So we'll see if Ole Miss can D up, man up, do whatever they need to do to stay in this game. This is one of those situations. Like I said, Auburn's a good team. Alan Flanagan's going to be there. Wes Flanagan's going to be there for Ole Miss, and this is their first time back, which means the jungle is going to be going absolutely nuts. And Alan Flanagan's a player that Ole Miss needs. I am a little bit worried. I don't know that this is going to happen, but I am a little bit worried that Auburn and going back, the moment might be a little bit too big for him. And you saw that with him struggling at LSU whenever he was looking forward potentially to this game. And he's a human being. He had to. This is a big moment in his career. So if that happened, if the emotions affected him that way, how does it look in Auburn, Alabama? How does that look? Tell me what that picture is. Now, if Matt Morrell is making shots, if Jamin Brakefield is making shots, if Juju Murray is making shots, that isn't going to completely matter. But I do think Ole Miss needs all four to at least be clicking at an average to good level for Ole Miss to have a chance in this game. They need to be careful not to turn over the basketball. They need to D up and be ready for what's going to come. Now, when Kermit Davis was at Ole Miss, Bruce Pearl struggled with that lineup. And then as Ole Miss's talent level just dropped down, Auburn was able to move on past it. So a team that D's up and plays hard defense, and you know Chris Beard is going to teach that, I'm expecting Ole Miss to come out against Auburn and play pretty well. I'm expecting this to be a fairly close ball game. I do think the atmosphere of this is going to be absolutely nuts, and it should be really good. This isn't a game I would predict Ole Miss to win, but if Ole Miss can make it through it and get through it, and if they do somehow win it, all of a sudden you have Auburn, Arkansas on Wednesday, and that turns into a freakishly big game as well. Really interesting stuff whenever you think about everything that's going on in the basketball program. There's some games coming up, and basketball season, once we hit February, everybody's going to kind of turn their attention to basketball season. At least I think they will. And then you have baseball starting up as well. Should be really interesting for Ole Miss sports moving forward. Then spring practice comes in March. It all comes really, really quickly. Transfer portal in April, all of that stuff. Pretty fired up about how it can look moving forward. But I hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. And thanks for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen. Every day as we continue to turn our attention to the portal as it is set to wrap up in about a week and a half. For your second listen, Locked On Ole Miss has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. For your second listen, go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 stream channel. For those of you on YouTube, we'll send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone. Have a good weekend.